So welcome, Leah Reich. So I walked right over the introduction. We've been trying to get this podcast scheduled for a while, so I'm super psyched that you're ready, willing, and able here on a Friday, or tan, rested, and ready, or whatever it is they say about these things. So welcome. I'd love to let the audience hear like your quick background. Although you've got such a great background, it's probably hard to do it quick. But the semi-short version would be great.
Hi. Thanks, Jim. Thanks also for being patient in the many months it took to get this together.
Persistence. See, persistence pays off.
Persistence pays off. And also, definitely on my part, there was a lot of stuff going on. So had to.
Well, you're busy. We're excited to have you on the podcast because you're a busy person. You're in demand. So
anyway, thank you. It's great to be here. Yes, my background. It was one of those things where I can either be very quick or it's going to be a story. So we'll see how we go with that. I'm currently
we love hearing the story. So don't edit yourself for the purposes of this podcast. That's for sure.
So I'm a couple of things. So my background has led me to where I am now, which is a combination of I am a user experience researcher, UX researcher, user researcher. One of the frustrating things about what I do is that there are an endless array of titles, and none of which were as smart as some of the titles that other roles have claimed, like going from, a data analyst to a data scientist or a programmer to a computer scientist. I think those are two of the smartest rebrands in industry history, because how much more money can you demand if you are a computer scientist or an engineer than if you're just a regular old programmer? But we're user researchers, even though we are doing forms of science similar to what data scientists do. I'm a user researcher. I do mixed methods research, which is qualitative into quantitative. I don't do the heavy lift of some of the bigger quantitative stuff, but I do some quant work as well. I'm also a writer. I've been a writer for way longer than I've been a researcher, and that is part of the fun background and journey that got me to where I am today. Currently doing some work. I'm a contractor working at...
I think that's where I first found you, was A Year of Wednesdays.
Yes. Was that what I was wondering what it was?
Yeah,
well,
that's what it was. Yeah.
Hold off on that a second, because that's a fun story. Really quick, I'm a contractor. I'm working at Mozilla on Firefox. Prior to this, I was at Instagram, did some really cool stuff at Instagram, was at Spotify before that. Before Spotify, I was Slack's first user researcher. And for a year, I was their only user researcher, which was quite a rocket ship experience, a lot of good learning and a lot of good figuring out what user experience and research really are and should be. Worked at some startups, worked at design studio. For all of that, I got a PhD in sociology, another unrelated master's in communication, culture, and technology from Georgetown, which my old schoolmates and I from Georgetown like to call our paper mache degree, because you could literally shape it to be whatever you wanted, which is very up my alley. And in all of that, I graduated from Berkeley with an incredibly useful degree in comparative literature in the mid-90s. So that was the start of my work.
That always makes me feel, I hear a line like that and it's Groundhog Day. I've come a long way from where I started. Oh, where was that? 17th century French poetry. Oh, what a colossal waste of time.
I mean,
my favorite lines.
You joke, but I did take a course in medieval French literature in undergrad. But here is the thing, jokes aside, my course in medieval French literature at Berkeley was one of the single best courses I have ever taken in my entire life. And I was in school for 14 years, 10 postgrad, 4 undergrad. In 14 years of school, that class, which I went into it thinking, I can't believe I take this class. It could be so stupid, so boring. Like, who cares about medieval French literature? Ugh. And I have to read it in medieval French. Blah, right? Turned out to be genuine, so much so that I, for years, thought about emailing the professor to tell him how much I loved it and what a wonderful professor he was. And then, of course, when I got around to it, he had died 2 years earlier. So lesson learned, don't wait.
That's an uplifting story.
I know. Love an uplifting story to start with. But the uplifting part of it was that actually genuinely, and I do think this is a little like a fun little, you look back, have you ever looked at like the pictures you take over like when you're on vacation and look at them over the course of your life
I
and
do.
realize
Yeah.
you kind of take the same picture over and over again without realizing it, like the way you frame things, the way like, the way the landscape looks, everything like that. In some ways, I think about what I learned in that class was I don't really remember what I learned about medieval French literature, to be honest, but I learned so much from this professor who made this class that could have been stultifying genuinely one of the most interesting classes I ever took, to the point that I had to miss it once in a semester, one time. And I was like, I have to miss class. And everyone in class was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to take notes for you? It was like, people were like, it was like that. You just wanted to be there. You wanted to hear what he had to say. You also wanted to get him off topic because he knew so much about so many things that he would tell these fascinating other stories and informational things. And he made knowledge exciting.
Well, it sounds like he was a great professor. I mean,
He was a
regardless of the topic, right?
but I think that's the takeaway, is that like but I think the bigger takeaway is that a great professor, or a person, not even a great professor, someone who is genuinely enthusiastic and curious about the world and about the people they're engaging with and interacting with, and who like respects themselves and their audience and their subjects and all of those things, can make anything interesting. And I don't know that I realized that fully at the time, but that in a weird way has been a real thread throughout my career. Like a lot of the work I've done, some of the most boring sounding projects have actually been the most fun, because you find a way to make them interesting. You work with fun people, you solve a cool problem. And some of the coolest sounding projects are kind of terrible because like they don't turn out to be as interesting. So you have to find the joy and enthusiasm in even the most boring things, and you have to find a way to like make it exciting to the people that you're sharing it with, right? Like when I finished my PhD, one of the reasons I immediately left academia, there are many reasons, let's be clear, but one of them was that I really like information and knowledge and data to be accessible and interesting and even entertaining if possible. Like you should be like, wow, I just learned something and it's cool. I don't know that I needed to learn it, but I'm glad I did. Right. Sure. Like in that class, like half the stuff I learned in that class, like, I don't know if I needed it, but I'm glad I learned it. And that's how I've like tried to approach a lot of things in my career, and academia, especially when I finished my PhD, was not into people who wanted to write, in a more approachable, mainstream, welcoming manner. And, that is also a problem that kind of plagues tech writing and the industry. Like it's like, making things so that people actually want to engage with what you have to say and what you have to share and want to find a way to use it. Even if it doesn't necessarily apply to them. I think that's something that like, I just see everywhere, and I try and avoid that. And I think it kind of in some ways started with him.
Well, it's going to, yeah. I mean, we're in a, tech writing has often been bad.
Yeah. I don't even mean tech writing, period. I'm talking writing.
Oh, yeah.
Place. Right.
But tech writing has always been
right.
bad.
Because tech writing is basically, it's very, very driven by jargon, and jargon is itself an alienating language.
Oh, totally. I completely agree.
I mean, it is literally a language of alienation as far as I'm concerned.
It is actually a problem, because then when you end up in a household where both people are in tech in some way, you just start speaking in jargon,
Yeah, it's worse. No, I know. I mean, whenever I talk with people who also work in tech, you can feel it coming and you're like, whoa, we have to stop. But yeah, so that is part of how I got to where I am. I did a PhD in sociology, despite never having taken any undergraduate courses in sociology and knowing if I liked it or not. I think I mentioned this to you in another conversation, but sociology is a weird one. It's interesting. I do like a lot. I did like some things about it. I didn't love everything, but what I loved and what sociology gave me, the real gift it gave me, was I trained to be an ethnographer. Like I did a lot of other stuff. I did social network analysis. I did things that probably, if I had followed those paths, would have set me up for a more financially remunerative career.
But you just don't know them. You just don't know that, you know?
You never know. But you know
Right.
what? You know what the thing is not only, oh, I mean, you want to talk about regrets we have in terms of not pursuing financially remunerative paths. In the 90s, my father, a longtime programmer since the 60s, repeatedly encouraged me, regularly, constantly encouraged me to learn how to code. And I tried and I found it boring. And I was good at it, but I was bored. And so I didn't pursue it. And there's not a day goes by that I don't think, what an idiot you were.
Well, it didn't appeal to you, you know, and
Right.
you don't have to be good to be a programmer. That's kind of one of the things that I mean,
True.
you did years ago, but the advent of the PC meant
You
that,
don't anymore. Yeah.
yeah, you crash your own desktop, nobody cares.
Right. But I think the thing is that I realized also over time, which is that what made it less interesting to me, and I think it has also what has brought me here and makes me particularly good at what I do in a way that, not to be a total egotist, and I can't believe I'm saying this on recording, but good in a way that most people in my industry and in my career, my, trade, whatever, my discipline, I guess is the word, aren't good. And I don't say that because like I think I'm some hidden genius. I think it's because every single time I've ever worked at a company, there have been one or two people who said, I just don't know anyone who thinks like you in this industry. I've never worked with anyone else who thinks like you. And I think one of the things that I realized over time was that I didn't want to go and like social network analysis is fascinating. You do learn a lot of stuff about people. Programming is interesting. Building stuff is cool, but I just really like working with people and I like people problems. I like figuring out, it's one thing to look at, like I looked at in social network analysis, I looked at power dynamics in dyadic and triadic relationships and communes, which is interesting. And that is a people problem, but I am much more interested in like understanding genuinely what kinds of behaviors are you engaging in? How can I observe? How can I talk to people and listen and be a part of this? And I think I like the people problem part of it more because I also really like coming up with solutions. Part of the interesting thing I think that you run into, of course, in academic settings where like some of that research is you're not doing solution. You're not helping come up with a solution. You're not helping come up with a strategic way to deal with some of these problems,
Sure.
whether it's a solution or not. And I think even in a lot of the like less people-oriented stuff, you can separate yourself from like people are doing something, right? You can make it numbers and you're away from the people. And for me, like I'm just a problem solver at heart. I love to solve a problem. And I really like to solve problems that people are having in a way that feels good for them, whether it's like the users of a product or even internally, like when teams are struggling or they're having trouble like negotiating with leadership, or they're just finding there's internal dynamics. Like, how can we fix this? What can we do? I once worked with a friend's startup before, like when they were very early days, and they thought they said they had their shit together. They knew what they were doing. They were like, we're gonna like, build this whole thing. And they showed me a big presentation of what they were working on. And I just started asking them really a bunch of questions. It's very straightforward, some of which made them very uncomfortable. Like they got prickly, they got defensive. And I said, I'm not judging you here. I'm genuinely trying to understand what you're doing. And they told me that after that, they went away and they realized that all the things they thought they were doing, everyone thought they were doing something different. Like they had not actually come to a common understanding of what it was they were doing and who should be doing what and how they should be pursuing. And they thought they really had it. They thought everything dialed in, and it turned out they had nothing figured out. And like, that's what I like to do. And that's what I like about the people problems is like, you might not have impact immediately at scale, although I have done that too with people problems. But a lot of times you might have impact more immediately and more directly, which then ripples outward to have impact at scale in the long run, right? It's like the different ways you can solve problems. And that to me is just infinitely more satisfying. I'd much rather look at a thing I made or a person I helped than be like, I came up with some numbers and like it went into this big strategy and who knows what happens next, right? Like I'd rather solve the problem with people.
Well, that makes you a bad fit for any big five consulting company because they don't really want to solve any problems. They just want a lot of billing. So let's talk about how that relates into user experience. So this is how we got on this topic, right? That because so this is interesting. So we buy mid-market, lower mid-market software companies.
Mhm.
But this problem is in startups, it's in giant companies. It's, I think user experience often gets melded into the, UI, UX. It's poorly defined as to what the problem set is and how to solve the problem. And you had a ton of experiences. So I'd love to hear your definition of this and sort of how it relates to kind of what you do on a daily basis.
I mean, it's a great question. I don't think there's a definitive answer. I think it depends. Like, obviously there is this sort of strictness of like the user experience. What will the user, what is your product for? How will they use it in terms of like in their lives, but also the how, like how will they use the actual, product you've designed? What will their needs be? What will their perception of the product be? How will they navigate the product? What will it facilitate for them? What will it make easier, make harder? All of that is part and parcel of the user experience. I think one of the things that I think is really tricky about user experience is that, well, there's like so many things that are tricky about them. I think maybe one of the most fundamentally tricky things about user experience is that user experience is never really only about the user, right? Not when you're building it in a company. If I was just going to say, like, I want to build an experience for you, Jim, the user, I could build an experience that really meets your needs in a way that is interesting to you, that like doesn't just give you so I think that's the other thing, right? Like a lot of people go into user experiences like, well, how do we give users what they want? You don't give users what they want. Users don't know what they want. And not because they're dumb, not because they can't figure it out, because it's not their job to think about it. It's not their job to identify how to solve a problem. It's their job to figure out, I have a problem. What's the quickest workaround for that problem with the known ways of solving my problem that I already have? So they might go, well, I want this solution, right? And you're like, but is that the best solution? I don't even know really what your problem is. That's just your workaround that you've kind of come up with based on like what you understand that you need to get done. But I think like beyond, I think it's important. I think like that's a whole topic of conversation we should get into, is like, what does it mean to not give the user what they want? I think there's a really big difference. And I think this is where a lot of people struggle. And like, that's why I want to start here, which is that there's a big difference between saying like, well, how do we design for the user and how do we design for the user in a company, right? Where we have certain ideas about how we build products, what we build products for, what our purpose is as a company. And also we have some business goals, right? So a couple jobs ago, I came up with a very dumb Venn diagram. Not dumb, it's a great Venn diagram, but it's just a Venn diagram. It's nothing big.
Venn diagrams are awesome.
All Venn diagrams are dumb. Awesome, not dumb. Yeah. They're great.
The circle of all Venn diagrams and good is just one.
It's just a big circle, right? Good point. Fair point. I say dumb, which is unfair because it feels obvious when you kind of say it out loud. But I figured out a couple jobs ago, and I put this Venn diagram together to help product teams and companies understand where their best opportunity is. And when you're doing user experience. And I think your best opportunity for doing user experience is at the nexus of user needs, not wants, but user needs and behaviors, product principles, because most products, as they're being built, there's a set of principles. We want it to be able to do this, and we don't want, this is important to us that we build it this way. You're not just like, you don't throw all your principles out the window just to like meet a set of needs. And then the third one are your business goals, right? Like, depends on what your business model is, depends on who you're beholden to, who you're not beholden to, what you want to do with it eventually, right? Like if you're a publicly held company, you're beholden to your stock, you're beholden to your stakeholders and your stockholders, right? You're like, you have to be thinking about, how do we increase profit? How do we increase these metrics? How do we do all of these things? And what might be best for the user may not have anything to do with any of those things, but you have to be mindful of them as you think about what the user experience is, right? And then there's also the product principles, which is like, Do you really want to do things that make people feel bad just to jack up the metrics? No, but you do have to jack up the metrics. You do have to meet the user needs, and you do have to do it in a way that feels like lightweight and fun and every day, or whatever your product principles are that you've agreed upon as a company or as a design, department or product department. And I think that user experience is kind of at the nexus of all of these things. It's not just what does the user want? It's not just what do we think we should build as product people? What are our principles? How do we, we're a bunch of geniuses. We know how to build everything. We know exactly what we're doing. We don't need to talk to anyone else. And it's not just the business people being like, yeah, but metrics are going down. You need to fix that.
But that's interesting because so look, I look at this from two perspectives in terms of the software marketplace, right? Startups that have an idea, somebody has an idea to do something. Now I divide those further into two camps. There's the people who really saw some interesting problem to solve and decided they were going to solve it and realized that people wanted them to solve it and there may be money in it. And then there's the people, and I have tons of friends, some of them have been very successful, that said, I just want to start a company. And when you said, to do what? Well, I just want to start a company. I want to be an entrepreneur, be a startup. But that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, I get it, but it's not, those products typically are crappy. I want to start a company. Yeah. And you don't know why, where, whatever. In our market, the interesting part is, here's our differentiating between us and startups. One good thing we have from a user experience standpoint is our companies have built products and they usually got a fair number of users using those products, right? And typically when we're getting involved, we're in an inflection point where we need to do something else. On the one hand, we've got a really good body of users that can give us feedback, and we have something that they can compare it against, right? They're using our thing to solve their problem in a certain way, probably good enough, or they wouldn't have been successful so far, but it's suboptimal. Like, now becomes the next problem is, all right, now what do you do next, right? Because I don't think anybody's ever really generally asked the users, like, you're using this thing, like, talk to me about it. Like, how does it work as a tool?
So there's a reason when I started with what user experience is. Then there's your next question now is, what is user research? And I think in between those is the question, and because the user experience is a lot of things, right? The user experience is, again, like I said, what are you going to use the product? How are you going to use it? What's it like to use the product? Like, what is it? Does it make sense? Can you figure it out? Does it actually solve your problem? Does it solve it kinda? Does it make it worse? Does it make one problem better and send one flying out the window? What's going on, right? That's your user experience. And there's a lot more to it. Like, I'm really simplifying it down. There's user research, but in between is there's this thing where you said, you people like, I just want to start a company. One of the reasons that the companies that are like, ooh, I had an idea, or I saw something, or I had this problem. I think some of the most successful companies are the ones that were like, I kept having this problem and I decided I wanted to solve it, right? For example, I worked at Slack. Slack, the same thing happened with Stuart Butterfield 2 times. Flickr and Slack, basically the same thing. Working on a game. The game's not going great. I mean, it's fine, but it's not going that well. But they need a tool. First one is we need a tool to be able to send pictures to each other. Second one was, or share pictures or photo repository or whatever. Second one was, we're working on this game. It's fun, but again, not going great. We need a tool to better communicate, like about the work we're doing and share our work and like have a place where we can talk. From the first was born Flickr. From the second was born Slack, right? And like when you are thinking about, I need to solve a problem for myself, it's really different than I just want to start a company or I just want to like jump in and like fix a problem that I think out there. And I'm not saying you can't do the latter, because believe me, there are plenty of people who work at plenty of companies who are trying to solve product problems for problems they have never had, right? Like that is possible. It's just different. I think the reason these other ones feel like they're better is that it's a person saying, I have pretty much identified a problem and have come up with something that could be a pretty good solution, but maybe it's not the best solution. Nobody knows yet, right? That's the thing. And that's where you're saying is like, so we've got this solution. It works pretty well. Now we either want to get that solution to work better, or we want to figure out what can we do next, right? And the thing about user research is that user research is not simply about how does your user use the problem, or how does your user use the product, right? It's not just about like, hey, I love this app and I use it in these following ways, or I don't use it in these ways, or I find it annoying this way. Like that's part of user research, or like I wish it did this, or I wanted to do this, or I don't like this color. User research, when it's done really well and really effectively, is a much broader form of inquiry that I'm going to get really philosophical for a second. Number one, to me, the actual point of view,
like back to medieval French poetry.
Oh yeah, we're going back to medieval French. No. This is actually just my philosophy on what user research really is and what makes it so powerful. Is that at its core, to me, user research is a way of building a shared language for all the people working on the product about the people who use the product, right? Because if I come in and I go, oh, users are trying to do this, and this is really hard, and someone in engineering is like, but I really just want to work on this thing, and I don't share that language with you, or if a product manager is like, ooh, I don't know, I have this idea, and I'm just really convinced my idea is the right idea, you're all working at cross purposes. And the whole point is to build something together that is functional, that feels cohesive, that doesn't feel like 16 different people worked on it in different moods and at different moments. Because end users can always feel when a product has been built by a disjointed, dysfunctional team. Always. Everybody always knows. And so I think what you're asking about is like, when you have this product that we've built and we've like, it works pretty well. Users seem to like it okay. It solves some of their problems. What do we do next? How do we make it better? Is there a new problem we could solve? Can we figure out how to solve the problem in a more effective way? User research comes in, and what user research needs to do is not just, okay, so what's going on with you in the product? Can you show me what you do? But user research, the real job in a lot of ways is to say, what is the actual problem you need solved? Not the problem you think you need solved, and not the problem you think this product is solving, but fundamentally, what is your deepest actual need and problem that's going on here? And you do that not by asking them what their problem is,
Sure,
but by asking them all around the thing that they do. What's your work like? How do you do your work? What kinds of things do you do? What tools do you use? What's it like to do your work? How did you get to this point? Like, oh, when you're doing this, can you tell me a little bit more about what's the last time you did this? How come you did that? Right? Like that kind of and you think it sounds sometimes like it's really easy to do. It's not easy to do, right? Because you're trying to do like 15 different things when you're doing user research, especially when you're doing like a deep qualitative interview. And there's a million ways, there's a million methods you can use in qual, mixed method, and quant. But really the goal is to try and get the best understanding of the actual deep problem and all of the ways in which people are navigating that problem. So there's like the deeper inquiry of like a set of in-depth interviews. There may be observation of how people are using the product. You might do a larger scale survey to understand people in this space. Like, let's say there's a startup around, I worked for a connected car startup years ago, and we were tasked with my coworker and I were tasked with coming up with a totally new product that would help teen drivers and their parents.
Oof.
Right? Right? It was really interesting. I know, super stressful, but really interesting. And what's really interesting is that when it started the connected car startup, it was about this thing, you plugged it into your
OBD2 port.
Thank you too. It was a port. It's been a little while and I don't have a car anymore, so I forget all of those words. And it would allow you to like clear your check engine light and do a couple other little things. And what was really fun about that is that it was a brand new startup. They had this idea. I was like employee 14. And one of the challenges was that it was like, do people know what the point of it? Right? Can they use it? Will they use it? Does this actually serve a problem? Right? Does this serve a need? And what was hardest was actually getting people in the company to understand how regular people think about cars.
Sure.
Right? And think about that space and think about, is this the most important problem they have when it comes to their car? And also when their check engine light comes on, what do they think, right? Like, are they going to be like, oh yes, I'll just pull over and swipe on an app? No, you're driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour and your check engine light comes on. 6 of the 6 people I talked to about this in the car, I had people in the car with me and they're like, oh, my immediate thought is like, I'm going to die. My car is going to blow up. Something's going to go horribly wrong. And so with that kind of like armed a little bit with that knowledge that like this product didn't really meet a need, but like people do have some kind of a need, we started with understanding, because basically it was exactly what you're asking. Well, this product, it's doing okay. We have users, but it doesn't seem to really be meeting the need. What can we identify as the next thing we do? And so the teens and teen drivers and parents thing came out. And we kind of had to start a little bit from scratch, but also with the idea of like, now armed with this knowledge that even if anecdotally I could have told you this, at least I have a little more understanding that users are scared. Driving is scary, right? Like owning a car is scary. And it sounds stupid, but for a lot of people, like there's a lot of emotional baggage that goes into being a driver, right? The car itself, your safety, money, all of these things. And now you add your child into the mix. And you have your child, but you also have a person who is trying to become an adult, and you need to give them a space to become an adult. So we did a bunch of interviews with parents and teens, and we didn't interview them together. And we tried to understand what the two separate sets of problems were that we needed to address, right? For parents, it's like, I don't want my teen dying. I don't want my teen doing anything stupid. I don't want them lost. I don't want anything to happen to them, but I don't want to drive them away. Literally. I don't want them to drive themselves away. Right. And for teens, it was like a mix of the, I want my parents to leave me alone, bravado. But then there was also this fear, right? What if something happens? Like, what if something happens? Who do I call? How do I get in touch with my parents? Right. So there were all these fears at work. There were all these things. And from there, you think the bigger problem we have to solve, because we all just sat down and we said, okay, well, this driving tool doesn't really give much to people. What about teens and parents? When I looked at the marketplace, all of the existing offerings were basically like very heavy-handed surveillance tools, right?
Sure. I can see why.
And you can see why. You can see why that would be your go-to, but you can also see why that doesn't really solve the problem. Right? It actually just makes new problems. Because if you have a teen and you heavily surveil them and you make them feel like they can't be trusted, that creates a new set of problems. If you heavily surveil your teen and you don't let them learn how to make decisions and deal with their decisions in the safest way possible, then they leave the house and they just make stupid decisions anyway when you're not there to surveil them, right? Like that was something that we learned in all of this. And that if you just go to your go-to solution and you don't try and understand like the really deep problems that people that are going to, like the weird things that are going to come up in conversation or in research, then you're not really understanding the user experience, right? Because I think user experience in a lot of ways is short selling it. It's like, what's the human experience of this product? There are people who are going to be out there using your product. And when we call them users and it's a user experience, again, it's a very like distancing, jargony way of thinking about like we make a product and users engage with the product. Even users engage with the product is such a gross sentence. No, people are going to use the stuff you build. They're going to use it.
Right.
You hope, and they're going to use it in ways you never imagined.
Yes.
One of my favorite apocryphal stories. I don't even know if it's true anymore. I have to track it down. There was this like organization that was making these special heaters for people to use in villages in sub-Saharan Africa where you had to drive longer distances for fuel. And it was very like it just was very hard for them. Right. So they were making these more energy efficient stoves and blah, 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 blah. And then they went back to visit and they found that people were using these stoves, but they were using them as stools to tend to the fires. It always had. And I love that story, whether it's apocryphal or not, is because you realize like you put something out there and people are going to use it in ways you never expected, good or bad. Today, I was reading an article about all the horrible, horrible deep fakes, like the sexual deep fakes that are like flooding high schools, right?
Yeah.
The ways, all of these horrible things where it's like one of the fundamental rules of any kind of user experience to me is that you cannot predict what people are going to do. You don't know if they're going to like it. You don't know if they're not. You certainly don't know how they're going to find new ways to use your product that you never imagined, right? And like the better you understand the people who are using it and what their concerns are, and what their needs are, and what their worries are, the more asymptotically close you can get to a user experience that helps them without also harming them. And like, that is, to me, is where you get into the bigger picture of it. Like, you're doing the research, even with your, like, yes, we have this startup and that software and people like it pretty well. You have to do the like fundamental user experience of like, what's the interface look like? Does it make sense? Can they navigate? Right. And then there's a couple steps down of like, okay, cool. What problems is this solving? Is it actually solving the problems well? Is it actually solving the right problems? And then if it's a bigger thing like AI or social media, is it causing harm underneath the problems it's solving? Right. And like, not all the products you work with are going to get to that deep level, but a lot of them will get close, even if it doesn't feel that way, because we're all just trying to get through the day. We're all people trying to get through the day, go through our work, deal with our stresses. There's always stuff going on. We always have a lot of things going on. And you want products and tools that don't make your life harder, that don't make your job more stressful, that don't make everything you do a pain in the ass because it gives you like an extra 20 minutes, even a couple seconds of doing something over and over again builds up, right? So how do you like think about all of the ways in which people work, and then how do you build around that? It's a very roundabout answer.
Well, no, it's a good answer. The interesting part is we've got enough, well, maybe not enough, but there's some good examples of just overall bad decision process. Juicero, great one. That, what the Juicero is?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I've made your entire Friday night, so you can YouTube this. It was a startup. It was a juice machine. And it was a Wi-Fi connected juice machine that was like super expensive, and they sold you the juice in these little packets, and they had the ads for it, like the ads for it that it used the crushing power of the juice machine was the power of like a Tesla, the weight of a Tesla, which, it seems like a hilarious, like, why would you even compare this? You're comparing something to something what they thought was cool. And then as they're releasing this thing, and it had the package you had to get with the pulp in it, you had to get from the company, and it connected to their Wi-Fi network to make sure that packet was still good, blah, blah, blah. And then some Bloomberg reporter was able to squeeze the juice with their hand harder than the machine, and then basically turned into like nothing, right? It was a solution in search of a problem. So they had those.
It wasn't even a solution, to be fair.
Right. Well, it was a solution to, I have $200 million that I would like to burn without hurting the environment by burning, literally burning the cash. How do I do it?
I mean, you hurt the environment by making junk that people will then throw away, and then we'll clutter up landfills.
Right. So there are some of those, right? But what's interesting to me is so in our size companies, we've got people who bought them, so they got to be doing something right compared to, may not be the best solution, probably isn't, could have been forced on our users. We don't know that by management. Right. And that's part of things we're not digging into, which we need to dig into. The challenge becomes, and I see this all the time, Slack will be a good example too, but in our business, the enshittification of our products is part of the problem, right? Our best founders saw a problem they thought they could solve. They had the pain themselves. They usually came from the industry. They started this thing. It got to some point successful, but then there's this problem of the beast has to feed itself. The unlimited growth. Okay. So there's a certain number of people who can use this thing, and they have. Now we got to keep growing, right? And how do we keep growing? Well, we move into another market, or we start enshittifying our own product by adding stuff into it that we think we want users to pay for. And that's I don't know how to solve that problem, because it's fundamental to our business that there are some companies that are going to hit a finite size, and that's the size they should be. Right.
Well, but Jim, that's very different from a user experience problem. That's an endemic to the industry problem that user experience.
That's why we know we can't solve that, right?
Right.
But
the problem is what? The
problem is that knowing that, we could probably do a better job of doing the next thing for those customers.
Right.
That next phase requires this whole user research that we don't do, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's like, hey, we're a successful company. We got 5,000 customers. We got to be doing something right. So let's just do the next thing, because we're going to be as good at that as we were at the thing we just did, right? Which is not true. right? That's fundamentally not true, but I think people don't know it. And it's really scary as a development team or an engineering organization to expose yourself to that. Let's just take a hard look at how people are using this thing, what problems it solves. Does it solve any problems? That's a hard thing for people to do. And it's easier just to just not do it. Just duck your head down. You know what I mean?
Hard. I mean, one of the things that a couple of years ago, I read this. It's gonna come out of left field. Just bear with me. So a couple of years ago, I read this obituary in the Washington Post. It was a really long one. It was great. It was about the guy. I think he founded what was like the Texas Steakhouse Roadhouse chain. Do you know that one? Like the
I do.
Texas.
Yeah.
And it was a really long article about him after he died. And I had zero knowledge of this guy. I've never been to a Texas Roadhouse restaurant in my life or whatever the hell it's called. And I don't mean that in a dismissive way. I just haven't. I realize I'm missing out on one of the culinary wonders of the world, but I'm not.
No, my brother-in-law was a manager of a Texas Roadhouse.
Oh.
Not missing out on the culinary experience of a lifetime. But it's another version. It's a non-Australian version of the Outback.
Outback. Is it the kind of place where when you ask people how the food is, they go, "You get so much," and then you ask them how it tastes, and they go, "The portions are huge," and they can never get from how big it is to what it tastes because that's not a connection they ever wanted to make.
So that is a good guess on your part. However, I think they're more known for the excessive line dancing birthday celebration thing.
Fine. Great.
So the whole clapping over your head kind of thing, the whole boots, the whole thing. Yeah.
Love it. So, but what I really liked about, and I thought about this a lot at Instagram, what I really liked about this article was that the founder said that his company, he knew it was good. He knew it had potential. But he couldn't get anyone to invest in it. And it wouldn't grow because he couldn't get into investment. He said, I tried everything from chasing celebrities down in airports when I would see them to asking if he's like, I did everything. I tried to get money every place. He's like, I had no shame. I just tried it. I mean, I don't necessarily obviously recommend that method, but he said, we did a lot of things. Some of them worked really well, some of them didn't. He said, but I think the really good thing was that because we failed a bunch in the beginning, we became less afraid of failure, right? We figured out we figured out how to deal with it. And I'm not one of those people, like I really hate the thing in the industry where it's like, oh, it's really, you can learn a lot from failure. Failure is good. You can learn a lot from success too, guy. Like you can learn a lot from anything. And I'm not fetishizing failure in the sense of like, you should fail a bunch. What I mean is that I think it gave me a lot of understanding about why it can be hard for people to take risks. As he said, he's like, when you don't fail, you become more scared of taking risks because you don't know how to problem solve as well because you don't know what was the thing that got you the success. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was something you did in your product. Maybe it was something you didn't do. And so you become paralyzed in this way of talking of like, what if we don't know the thing? And I could see it at Instagram, which because Instagram for a long time had just basically been a straight up rocket success, right? Whatever Instagram did was pretty good. And because it was so big, when it had a problem, like when feed started to kind of like people weren't as into feed, they could brute force it with the introduction of stories, which was essentially Snapchat, right? But for Instagram. And then when stories started to decline a little bit, like did they have the cultural juice to brute force it again? Because that's when TikTok was really coming out, right? And so you have these, but what I think you had was this sort of, you could feel a little bit of like the fear of taking a risk. Number one, because Instagram has 1 billion users, it is much harder to take a risk when you have 1 billion users, right? Because it's really
in some ways yes, in some ways no, right?
No, right. Well, but like because in some ways yes, because like you have a much bigger audience to piss off if you do it wrong.
Yes.
And then the backlash is bigger, and in some ways no, because you can test different things out and you can try some stuff and whatever. But I think really there's also just that cultural feeling of like, ooh, what do we fail? And I think that like, it's so normal. Like I cannot tell you I've worked with a lot of designers, a lot of product people. I've worked with a lot of engineers, and it's hard to put something you have made in front of someone and watch them say mean things about it. It sucks for them. It doesn't suck for me. I didn't make it, so it's fine for me. But it's hard. But I recognize that. Like I coach them. I don't let them talk. I tell them, sit on your hands. If you are in the room with me, sit on your hands. You can't tell the person what to do. You can't show them what to do. You have to see how they use it. And it's hard because it's your work. But I think it's vital for people to sit I think even before you get to like the bigger, deeper inquiry that I'm talking about, I think there are two things that need to happen. One, I think you need someone who can come in and say, okay, how do we get here? Like not the person who's giving you money, not the person who's going to okay your experiments, not your person who pays your paycheck, but someone who can come in and be like, hey everyone, let me learn about what you're doing. Like, I'm new. I can ask dumb questions. I can be here to help a little bit and identify some of the like team dynamics and the ways things work and how people are making decisions and where you are learning stuff and why things have happened the way they have. Like a little bit in a little bit way, it's like a little bit of like organizational therapy where it's like, oh yeah, how have these decisions gotten made and how did this part of the product get built? And was it the same way as this part of the product? Did you guys feel like these work together? And not in a way where it's like trying to find fault, but just trying to understand how has this happened? Why are we here? And why are we afraid of making that next step? That to me is like, I think you can't just come in and do a little bit of user research without understanding like where are we as a team, because you still need to make the product as a team, regardless of what user research does or doesn't uncover about your users and your product itself, right? You still need to get the part where you can make it. And then the other thing that has to happen before you can get to the deep inquiry is you need to see people use your product. You need to watch them. You need to watch them be confused or be delighted or both. You need to watch them be frustrated. You need to watch them say things that make you feel really bad about work you thought was good, right? You need to like take that in and be okay with it, even if it sucks. Like, figure out what that means, right? Not get in that, and then like not take it as like one person, because that's the other thing that I think is really important and hard for people to remember about research is that we are not taking the words of one person who's like, I hate this layout, this color blue sucks, I want a wall of buttons, right? We don't build for one guy. We don't build for you. We don't build for me. We don't build for any of us in the team. We have to look across the behaviors and attitudes and experiences of a wide range of people. And we have to keep track of all of those threads so we can be like, the bigger problem users have isn't where we put the button. It's that they're not certain they want to click the button, so they don't go down to find it. And we haven't made them certain they want to click the button because of X, Y, and Z. Then we get to the button problem, right? Like when people like, it's like, and you're like, why aren't they finishing checkout? Well, part of it is that the checkout experience is confusing, but part of it is that we haven't made them feel confident. We don't understand how people shop. We don't know why they would want to buy these things or what they're hoping to get out of it. We don't know what's going on. So by the time they get to their cart, it's not really the checkout experience that is bad. It's everything that has led up to it. They just don't feel compelled to really go through with the purchase, right?
Well,
And you don't know
I
that unless you
define that
do it.
as a Maslow's hierarchy of needs when it comes to software, right? That is a really interesting point. And one of my fundamental points is that, I look at it from a consumer standpoint, right? It's you don't want to click the button if you don't know what's going to happen, right? It's the, it's the confusing, I hit this. Are they charging my credit card right then? Is my shipping address or whatever it is? There's that they got to be comfortable that they can go backwards if they need to go backwards, or they know for sure exactly what's going to happen when they hit that button, and they're guaranteed it's going to go through. Right? It's the, you click on something and it fails out. Did half the order go through? That's the stuff that panics users and keeps them from touching something. And that's one of the fundamentals that we see in our business is that at the lowest level, the users have to feel comfortable that they're not screwing something up when they take an action in your software product. That it's whatever they do is safe and reversible, and they will know what happened, right? And that's a really hard thing to build into a software product.
I think also not to yes and I'm going to yes and you rather than say you're wrong. I think you're right.
Second City. Okay, Second City. That's good. That's a Second City technique. Yes and.
I'm going to yes and. I think you're right, but I think that is one problem in a bigger picture. I do think that people want to know what something does. They want to feel confident, that you need to make them feel confident and safe. But I think confident and safe in taking the action is not even the fundamental question in a lot of cases. And I think that's the problem, is that when you don't watch people and you don't talk to people and you don't really engage with people and you're too afraid of that, you think that's the problem. So you want to like label it better and say, this is what's going to happen, right? But a lot of it is, what is making them afraid of committing and hitting the button in the first place? It's not just what will happen. Will I get charged? Ooh, will this transaction go through? Am I going to post something like publicly that I don't want to be public? I want it to be private, right? What are they afraid of more than that? They're not just afraid, will I be charged? Because you can reverse a charge. They're not just afraid of like, will I post something to the internet? People post things to the internet every day. There's something bigger and deeper that is making them be like, ooh, right? So here's a fun experience. Here's a fun example. When I was working at Spotify, I was working a lot on podcasts. I did a lot of work on the podcast space, both on the product and in the content side of things. And, you know, at the time, it was before the whole Joe Rogan thing.
I'm sorry, who's that? Joe?
Joe Rogan. Yeah.
I just wanted to light you up.
I like, no, you want to try and get an opinion out of me, and this is not an opinion sharing space. The thing is like, you couldn't light me up because I knew you were full of it on that one. I was like, really?
I mean, I am not a Joe Rogan listener for a very different reason. So yeah.
Right. Yes. But I was like, I know you know who he is. So you can't even fool me on that one. But since relatively early on into Spotify's podcast journey as a product, they kept saying, how do we get people to listen to more podcasts? And even product managers like, how do I help people get a podcast habit? Like, how do I get them to go from like, to listen to something, and then to get from like day 1 to day 3 to day 7 to 14, 14 to 30, whatever. And I did some research and I came back and I was like, y'all, we're asking the wrong question. The question isn't that users aren't asking is, how do I find a podcast I like? The question a lot of our users are asking is, are podcasts for me? And I said, more fundamentally, a lot of users are asking, what's a podcast? And do I care about it?
Yes.
Right. And that question, a lot of times, that bigger, deeper question allows you to start to identify solutions way more effective. It takes a little bit longer up front, but you identify way better solutions. Because all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, people don't know what a podcast is. Or if they don't know what that podcasts are for them, what they're looking for is, I came up with this little thing. I called them affinity beacons, which is like, let's say you walked into a bookstore and you've never looked at a book in your life. Let's say there are a lot of people who grow up with a really low level of literacy, and then they really learn to read and get into reading as an adult, right? So that's not like an unfounded example. And it's not saying in the mocking way. Imagine you have not spent your life reading, you're not comfortable with reading, and you walk into a bookstore for the first time as an adult, feeling like you can read, but you don't know if you can read books yet, right?
Well, I have to ask you, first of all, are we walking into Cody's in Berkeley, or are we walking into a used bookshop in
Cody's closed.
Cody's closed, I think. Yeah.
Moe's is still around though. Anyway, let's just say you're walking into let's make it easy. You are walking into a classic Barnes and Noble where things are brightly lit, everything's labeled. It's not like a musty, cool, weird hole in the wall used bookstore where you're going to find some random treasure that you are looking for as a lifelong voracious reader. I'm talking you walk in, like you literally walk into the app version of a store, right? Like you walk into whatever you would look at, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, but it's a store. So old school Barnes and Noble, right? You walk, there's even a CD listening room in the back. This is where we are.
Oh, wow. Not HL, the CD. Okay.
Yeah, I think they still have one of those actually at the Barnes and Noble in Union Square. Anyway, you walk in, and in some ways, in the back of your mind is, are books for me? Do I belong here? Do I even like books? Because you're scared. You're like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. Like, I don't really think this is my thing. Like, you know what a book is. And at least you're up on the people who are like, I don't know much about a podcast. I talk to people who are like, I know literally nothing. I don't know what a podcast is. And then 20 seconds later, they would tell me about all of the like 4-hour radio shows they listen, like Steve Harvey. I was like, buddy, that's just a podcast. Like, it's all the same thing, right?
Yeah, but then they do the Nigel Tufnell, but this one goes to 11. No,
right.
But this is on the radio.
Right. It was they had this very, like, podcasts were very conceptual. So maybe for a lot of people, books are still conceptual. Anyway, I'm really belaboring this metaphor. I don't want to belabor it much further analogy, where you walk in and it's like, imagine it was just a bookstore and nothing. Imagine it was one of those musty old weird bookstores where it feels like you need to know what you're looking for. You need to know why you're looking. And you're someone who's very new to reading. And you're like, where would I even begin? You'd probably just walk back out. You'd feel like, oh my God, this is not for me. I am not a reader. It turns out I was fooling myself. I got to go. Versus if you walked into a place and the first thing you saw was like, hey, are you really into Narcos, the TV show? Hey, do you love stamp collecting? Hey, I bet you really like anime, right? Anything that you could look to and go, oh, I do like that. Like basically something you could zero in on and go, oh, I know that. I may not know books about it, but I know that thing. Right? And then you could go there and from there safely start to explore. Oh, are there books on this thing I'm interested in? Maybe I could look at one of those. And maybe from there, I could start to like find something. Maybe I don't like the way this writer wrote it. I don't like the way this podcaster talks about it, but I do like these stories. I do like this. And then you find your way in, right? You like look for a little lighthouse beaming in the darkness going, bird watching, your thing, books about it. Right. And I think that I would never have understood that if I hadn't understood that, like, you don't just have, like, part of the thing that I think is really challenging is that when you build a product, even if your initial idea is like, you're coming up with a solution, it's really cool. The farther in you get into building a product, the more you get into like product building space with your little product building blinders on, right? And you think like you start coming up with solutions that like feel really obvious because it's like, well, this would be a solution, but it's a solution based on the model you're already working with. And you never challenge that model by forcing yourself to step outside and go, whoa, there actually might be a different solution that works, right? We just have to keep making sure we keep our perspective broad and like new needs to be refreshed. Our perspective needs to be refreshed regularly. I remember at Spotify, I did a project. This is again before Joe Rogan. And, Spotify at the time kept saying, oh, we're the second largest podcast network in the world after Apple. And I was like, guys, we are not. We are the third. Because you know what the biggest one is YouTube.
Yes.
People are over there listening to YouTube podcasts all the time. And everyone was like, why do people go to YouTube to listen to podcasts? And so I did a big project. They still use it, I think. That was essentially like, people don't go to YouTube to listen to podcasts. They listen to podcasts because they're already on YouTube. And that sounds so stupid and obvious and straightforward. But when you're in the problem space, you don't think of it that way. So you start to think, well, they go to YouTube. They're going to YouTube to listen to podcasts. What does YouTube have that we don't have? Well, they have video. That must be why they're going there, right? But if you shift the perspective and you think, oh, they're already on YouTube, maybe there's something else that is driving this behavior beyond just the visual, then opens up new opportunities for solutions for you, right? And even one of the guys, like there was a longtime podcast guy who came up to me after I did that presentation. He was like, I cannot believe this, but you fundamentally changed my perspective on podcasts and video and YouTube. He's like, I was 100% like, I don't know what she's doing. I don't know why she's doing this. Like, I know what we need to do. And he was like, you threw everything I thought out the window with that. And not just like I'm patting myself on the back, but because all I really want to do with people is like, you have to shift out of your little blinder space and develop a new way of looking at the problem and understand like the way you're approaching it is really, it's really limiting you and kind of keep you from actually coming up with a more valuable solution to like, so your earlier question, which I do remember, which is we have this, eternal growth versus could we just build for like, we have 5,000 customers who love us. Could we keep doing that and build a slower product, right? Part of that problem is venture capital is like the eternally hungry beast, right? That demands eternal growth.
Sure. Well, and that's definitely the venture space,
Right. But I'm not saying you, but that's where that eternal growth mindset comes from. You always have to show growth. You always have to show growth because that's what venture capital, right? They're like, you got to keep growing. You got to keep your burn rate down. You got to do all these things. We want to see what, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like crazy tech industry mayhem, which I just think is it's just toxic in a really remarkable way. But I also think there is an enormous amount of joy and value that industry doesn't seem to see in identifying a user space that may be finite, but you nail the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And you do really well. And I think you do that by respecting your users and taking them seriously, but also knowing that there is a boundary, that it's not about building what they want or building what you think worked last time, but understanding how their problems are evolving and how your product is meeting their needs and isn't meeting their needs and is actually making some problems harder while it's solving others. Like, you have to be willing to open that up, that dialogue, and you have to be willing to do it in a way that's not like, I talked to this one guy and this is what he thinks, and he's just such a good customer, I really want to do it that way. He wants this. That's not what user research is. There is also, like, look, if you have customer service and you get a lot of feedback in, you're getting feedback is very valuable. It's super, super important. But the feedback you're getting are people's responses to the existing problem and the solution they can see based on their current mental model. And your job as a product is to identify the mental model you want to help them get to and try and design products that move them toward that space where their problems are actually being solved in a way they're like, oh, wow, this does feel really nice. And this actually isn't bad. This is pretty great, rather than like, oh, this solution is really actually limited. I was so focused on solving this one pinpoint thing that I didn't even think about all the problems around it, right? Like at Instagram, I was working on a team and we were tasked with, we're in the Instagram stories phase. We were tasked with two things: increase original content sharing and help people feel closer to their friends. I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about all of this. I'm not going to share them at this time. I'm just going to say that what we did was pull on existing research and we did a brainstorm. In the brainstorm, we came up with a bunch of ideas that we tried out. And one of them was an idea I had about why people are hesitant to share, why they're not comfortable sharing. Right? Like, we had some knowledge about why people aren't comfortable sharing. And that is not maybe the way most people would approach it. They might be like, well, how do we just get them to share based on what we know about people sharing, right? Give them more buttons, give them this, make them stuff to draw on, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, it's the same thing as I was saying earlier with your buy now button, right? If you just focus on the existing buttons, if you just focus on the existing workflow, like I said in a presentation later that year, I said, we are treating sharing on Instagram like it's an obstacle course. We just have to shove everyone through the obstacle course and get them over the line. And I was like, that's not how it works. Because first of all, like half our users aren't even at this obstacle course. They're off doing something else. And second of all, you don't want it to feel like an obstacle course. You want to come up with things that make people want to share. That is how people will share, right? And
Sure.
you want people to want to push the buy button, not just feel safe that like when they push it, the right thing will happen, but you want them to get to that buy button and feel so confident in the decision that has brought them there that they're like, yep, going through, no second thoughts. Absolutely, right?
That's interesting, but it's I think those are two different problems. The interesting part is my point on the second part of the problem is this issue of, we've designed things a certain way, and that users don't feel comfortable. It's not even just an obstacle course. They don't feel comfortable doing the next thing because they just don't know what it's gonna do, right? And it's we always want, and we've learned a lot of stuff. We have some of our software products that are super complicated, and we got really interesting feedback from users using it that actually like the complication for certain reasons, right? But they felt comfortable in this interface that they could literally experiment like crazy, and they weren't going to screw anything up, right? That was kind of the unlock for us, in that this is super complicated, but they always felt the way we delivered our product was they could always reverse anything they did. So they never hesitated and we saw when we had people watch them, it's like, what is this guy doing? And it's like, wow, that's interesting. Who even thought of that? For example, it's an ERP-like application involved in the automotive space, and you got a tech that's working on a car. And so they're going to basically just have that car's profile up, right? That they're working on. And we watched this guy open like multiple sessions. I'm like, I don't understand this. Like, you're working on one car, right? And you start talking to him. Well, as it turns out, most of the OEMs like Toyota, whatever, they have a certain amount of time they allocate for a task, right? One of these things was like 30 minutes for an oil change. And the guy's like, you know how many times I've changed the oil on a Camry? I don't know, 50,000 times. He said, they say it takes 30 minutes. I can do it in like 7 perfectly every single time, but they won't pay us if I do it in 7 because they think I'm missing something. So I just leave the session open and set my watch. And at 29 minutes, I go close out the session. So it turned out the guy was working on like 3 oil changes at the same time. And I was like, wow, this is super interesting. Like, I never thought they would use, but he was very comfortable. Like, I was certainly comfortable in your product. You'd never, like, I could open all the windows. I wasn't going to camp anything up. It felt great, but it was just kind of like, I would have never even thought that. Like, this is the last thing that would come to my mind, which is interesting.
I know, I agree with you. I'm not saying like every single thing is people aren't confident with the thing or they're afraid. What I mean is more around that's what is someone doing that you don't expect, and what does that teach you? And then that's like half the problem. That was the one half of the problem. Then there's the other half of the problem, right? There's like someone's doing something. And then I'm talking about the people who aren't doing something, right? Like there's the people who are doing, you're right. They are divergent problems. That was the one I was talking about earlier. People are going to do a bunch of weird shit. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Because what problem are they actually trying to solve that you didn't realize they needed to solve? And that if you had just kept focusing on your product the way you imagine it, you would have lost out on all of these wild ass opportunities. And now maybe that guy's way of solving things is not something, maybe you can't do it for regulatory reasons. You don't know, like, you don't know what you can do, but you can be like, that's cool. It would be cool if we could work on that product area. You don't know if you can, because again, remember, product principles, business goals, and user needs, right? Like there may be some product principle where it's like, we have to adhere to regulatory need, but whatever. And that's one thing, which is like, what are people doing and what problems are they solving or trying to solve, or how are you inadvertently helping them or inadvertently making things more difficult? You need to get to the heart of that. Like along those lines, when I was at Slack, one of the most interesting projects, this is the project version of loving my French medieval literature class. So the last project I worked on at Slack before I left was we were building Slack Enterprise. Slack Enterprise Grade didn't exist. And we were building Slack Enterprise and we were working on the admin dashboard. And Slack at the time, I think had like 600 and something employees worldwide. And the previous year we'd been like 2 something. And Slack always worked best for Slack at whatever size it was at that time. But even as Slack grew bigger, you could feel Slack straining, like to really fulfill everybody's needs the way it was. But even with that said, not a single person that I worked with had ever worked in a huge company. They had never worked in they certainly never worked in enterprise IT, right? They had never worked at companies of 10, 20, 40, 100,000, right? Let alone like IBM, right? And so I basically did research and it was hard because Slack for Enterprise didn't exist. I had to talk to potential customers, which meant dealing with sales, which meant explaining my job to sales, and my job and sales jobs are like, they're like polar opposites. Sales is like, I want to close a deal. Don't mess up my commission. And they're like telling how the product's going to work. And I'm like, well, they're like, don't mess up. Don't say that things aren't going to come think are going to come. And I was like, I got to understand how they do things so those things can come. I don't think you understand how this works. So there's a lot of those negotiations, but I talked to a lot of people I talked to CTOs, I talked to VPs of engineering, I talked to all of those, but they were great because they gave me the big picture. And then I talked to a lot of IT admins. I talked to IT admins at Walmart. I talked to IT admins at NBC Universal, IBM. I was like,
Walmart headquarters. You didn't just walk into a random Walmart.
I did not walk into a Walmart. I'm talking Walmart. I'm talking Walmart headquarters. I'm talking people who are responsible for like can you imagine me? You could imagine me walking in at Walmart and being like, can I ask you some questions? Do you do IT here? You 100% can picture me doing that.
Yes,
No.
I 100% can.
No, this was like the people at Walmart headquarters. And I think like this is going to sound so dumb, but when you stop to think of what it means to do enterprise software, you realize these are people who are basically responsible for, I don't want to know how many different softwares, for tens of thousands of people. They have to like get people onboarded. They have to monitor things. They have to manage. They have to email. They have to import. They have to do all of these things. And they are not like, it's such a weird way to say this. They're not important, right? They're not the VP. They're not the person in HR who wants to know like how are people using this and do we have insight into what kinds of usage, and can we like basically can we justify the money we're spending on this? Can we deal with problems internally? Can we see how much people are using this product? Can we get metrics about like the how much people are using this versus other tools, all of those things, so we can justify our spending or monitor our employees or whatever it is. These are the people who are like basically invisible. They just facilitate all of the stuff, but their job is super complicated, right? And doing the job that project was genuinely one of the most interesting projects I've ever worked on, because you're first of all, you're forced to look at like VPs of engineering and CTOs who are actually very cognizant of the work these IT guys are doing, but they also have they have a bird's eye view, and the IT guys are like just in the, in the shit, right? And we had to figure out, how do we build an admin dashboard that actually lets these guys do their job and not in a way that's terrible, right? And that meets those needs without, because everyone else like around the company, they're like, oh, we have to have all these other like dashboards for like metrics for, CTOs and HR and everything like that. And essentially doing this work, we were able to build a really, really, really strong argument that you have to build a dashboard that is just for people who are doing the job of IT. And you have to build a separate set of dashboards that are connected. Like IT should have access to those, but it's like, you shouldn't have, random HR people and the CTO running around in the IT dashboard. Like you're just messing everybody's jobs up, right?
Totally.
That's one type of work where you're like, what are you doing? And how do we solve your problem? Right. And like your tech, right? The tech doing all the oil changes, he knows what he's doing and he has a job and he needs to get that job done. And he knows he's got a bunch of workarounds for those jobs. And your role as a company is to think about, how do we like make you not have to do workarounds, but then also like open up opportunities for you to do other stuff that might be valuable to you without making your life harder. Same thing with the IT admins. We're like, how do we get you to import a bunch of emails and manage everybody's instances without making your life harder, but also giving you new tools to justify all of the work you're doing so that you can like your job can be better. And then there's the other problem, which is we want people to do something, but they're like not doing it, or they like a lot of it, but something is really holding them back from fully embracing this product. And that problem is a lot more about, it's about what different problem do we need to solve for your mechanic. Sorry, not a mechanic. They're called service technicians. I learned that the hard way by calling a service technician a mechanic.
The whole flight attendant versus stewardess. Yeah.
Right. Well, to be fair to the registered technician, they do go to 4 years of school training for that. Oh, yeah. And they felt mechanic. The person I worked with felt mechanic was really like, made him sound like a greased monkey who didn't know what he was doing. And I can fully respect that.
Different in age groups. So you say mechanic to my age group, they're thinking Charles Bronson.
He was younger than I am. He was probably
movie.
Yeah. But I think that's one set of problem solving. And then there's the other set of problem solving, which is really about like, what is keeping you from doing the thing? And it's also just like with your guy, at the same time, while they're two different sets of problems that you have to approach conceptually, someone has woken up and is ready for dinner. You will hear him moving about now.
I haven't seen him yet, the elusive Lumpy, but a proof of life is good. A proof of life is useful. I think it's this valuable proof of life. Oh, hello, handsome. Hello, handsome.
You're going to see my pile of junk here.
Oh, I just block it with my body.
that's what I was doing. But then I let the curtain slip. Hey, buddy, is it dinner? Yeah, well, not yet. It was dinner 33 minutes ago. So anyway, you are in effect doing the same thing. What you are doing is you are understanding what is the actual fundamental set of problems. Just because one guy's comfortable and is just doing a bunch of workarounds, and one guy is like, ooh, I don't know what's going to happen. He's confident, he's not confident, but at core, you're still doing the same thing, which is understanding the actual full big picture scope, right? For mechanic guy, registered service technician guy, I want both parties to feel confident here. The bigger picture is I want to do my job efficiently. There's a bunch of inefficiencies that I have to deal with. I just have to navigate those. I'm trying to navigate those in the fastest way I can, because I also have to like do as many oil changes as I can in order to meet, like, I'm hampered by these systems and I'm hampered by this system, and I have to navigate those systems. I'm confident with your software, but I have a bunch of other problems that you can't see because you're not in the shop with me. Right. The other one is like, confident or not with the system, they have a bunch of other problems you can't see. And one of those problems might be, I don't know if it's okay to share the thing I'm about to share when I press share. I don't know if I'm supposed to. I don't know if people want to see it. I don't know if it's cool. I don't know who it's going to go to. Who's going to see it? What's going to be the repercussion for me, right? Really, though, it's still the same mechanism of when we think about the big picture of a product, are we seeing the actual big picture, or are we seeing what we think the big picture is based on our limited understanding of how we build the product, how we use the product, how we see people use the product in a sort of very superficial way? And when it comes down to it, user experience, and thus your real user research and your real user experience, is fully understanding as much of the scope of the actual human behavior, what people are doing, why they're doing it, what they're going through, all of those sorts of things. And then pulling it back and being like, how do we help them solve this problem in a really good way? How do we help them actually figure out how to get from point A to point B in a way that does all these other things that we didn't actually think about solving? Or does it turn out that point B is actually point F and we have to get to I'm a researcher who thinks very strategically. I really love strategy. And I think a lot of people struggle with strategy because strategy is a little bit, everyone thinks they're talking about it, and a lot of people don't talk about it as much as they should. I have a way of saying strategy, but I've been working with someone and I really like how he says it. So I'm 100% going to steal it right now, which is what I used to call big S and little s strategy. Big S strategy is where you want to head to. Little s strategy are your steps that hopefully get you close, but don't lock you in, so that if you need to adjust big S, you can,
Sure.
You can little s your way in a different, slightly adjusted way. He called it one-way and two-way door strategy. Your one-way door strategy is your 2 to 5 year strategy. You want to lock in, right? Because you don't want to be adjusting your 2 to 5 year strategy every 6 months. You can't do anything. And I've worked on teams that they're constantly.
By definition, it's no longer a 2 to 5 year strategy.
You would think that, Jim, but I've had a lot of experience with people who don't seem to fundamentally understand that. I have a little PTSD from this, from too many years in the industry.
No, it's a huge problem. Look, it's a huge problem because there is it doesn't feel okay as an executive to say you're not sure what that 2 to 5 year strategy is, right? That's the problem, because sometimes you don't know. Sometimes I need a little time to figure out the strategy, right? We don't know the answer, right?
I mean, on that note, can I just say, I'm not an executive. I'm not a leader. I'm not a leader in the sense of like, I don't have the title of a leader, but I get told frequently that I'm a really good leader. And I think part of it is that I think there's this idea that to be a leader, you cannot show weakness, and that vulnerability is a sign of weakness. And I actually think that there can be something really powerful about acknowledging that we do need to figure out where we're going to go. And we're not entirely sure. We have some ideas. This is where we're going. We need as a team to figure out what that strategy and what that direction is. And that once we do that, like, I think there's this I work with a product. The person I just stole that from is the first product lead I've worked with in a really long time, who does product in a way that makes sense to me. And that way is, I don't think it's an executive's job to say, this is what you have to do. This is what our whole entire, like, yes, you do have to have some idea of what your product is going to do and what it should do and where it's like headed. But I also think that there is a way of thinking of like, okay, we need to identify what the strategy is. We need to identify that as a team. I want the team to identify what they think is the best, most functional 2 to 5 year strategy, heavily informed by insights, heavily informed by all of the knowledge you have about the product, about what you're doing. And then we will work on that together. And if I feel really confident that this is the right strategy, I will put a stake in the ground. And in the meantime, I'll give you cover to do this work. I'll protect you from upper management. I'm going to make sure you have the space to do this job, this work. And I want you to come to me with what you think is the best strategy for this product, feature, whatever it is, right? Because you do the work. You're the ones heavily involved in the actual work. What do you think is the best strategic decision here for the product as a whole? And then we come together. And then if I feel really confident, then I'm the one, it falls on me to say, I agree with, this is the strategy we're putting forward, right? Like, that's why product leaders get paid a lot of money, because they have to basically stand out there with their little flag all by themselves. And if shit hits the fan, it's on them, right? Not on the team. It's supposed to be. Usually it's the team that gets laid off and not the product lead, but whatever. Another topic for another day.
No, but look, that's my only job. So
right.
Have you ever seen the movie Margin Call?
No.
Good God.
Oh, no.
Great Jeremy Irons line where he asked the team, he's like, what do you think my job is? And he said, my job is to predict what's going to happen a day, a week, a month, a year from now. That's it. Right. Yeah. My job is I can ask any question. I can provide any air cover because my companies can't fire me. We own them.
Right.
So that's my only job, to protect the teams all the way up to the CEO level, to give them room to make their decisions. That's it. Right. And everything else is superfluous to that mission. That's it.
Right. And what you need is, I have another friend who was a product lead for a long time. And he said, for me, the job of user research is to tell me how to think about a problem. Right. And I think one of the things is like what you're saying, if your industry has a user experience problem and is a user research problem, what you're looking for essentially is someone to help you and help the teams at these companies think about these problems more effectively so that they can come up to you with strategies and solutions that you feel good about.
Yes.
Putting a stake in the sand, right? And you do that by, we don't have to go into all the different ways you do research in all the different ways. I mean, I've talked about a bunch of right things, but I think we do that by doing all the things we've talked about, which is saying like, also, there's another thing I did that I think is really important. I do want to talk about this one, which is when you're thinking strategically, it's not just about looking at like, what is the research and what are we doing? I have a way of doing what I'm like, I don't really do a competitive analysis in the classical sense. I think it's important, but I do this thing that I call an opportunity matrix, which is basically.
Oh, is that a 4x4 grid? Ooh.
It is not a 4x4 grid. I have those too, but this is a bigger.
People love 4x4 grids.
I know who doesn't love a 4x4 grid, but this one's a little more substantial and it takes a little bit more time. And I'm making a team do it right now, which is, so I have a real belief in that user experience and all of this. Speaking of leadership and speaking of vulnerability and speaking of like, sometimes you don't know what your strategy is, right? And it's scary, especially as an executive, to have no idea. And that's why you have to hire smart people who you trust, who can help you figure out how to think and figure out what strategy is right. You can't scare them into doing it or like frustrate them into doing it and then get mad when they don't and come up with a bad strategy yourself. I mean, you can, but that never works. So the thing is that I think so before the opportunity matrix, I also think that there is something really powerful. And this is what I meant earlier about coming in and like, I think your user experience journey, for lack of a better
Well,
wavy word.
how I need to improve, use the word journey. That's like a thing for me.
Sorry.
Not everything is a journey, right?
Not everything is a journey, but I don't know. I don't have another word at this time. I think if you want to get better at doing user experience, if you want to improve user experience, I think that actually it has to start at home, Jim.
You're acting as if I have some control over that. I'm
No,
in a very funny situation.
I know. But what I mean more is that like you have to start a little bit with your team, right? You have to start like, and that's what I meant about like, well, how's the team making decisions? What's going on? All of those sorts of things. And I think there is really something cool about having someone who is not a lead in the sense of like a product lead or an executive, but is like literally their job is to like listen. It's a little bit of like team therapy and to say, I think we should all figure out what page we're on. I did this actually with Instagram stories. I did it in a really fun way, which is we had a big, it was like 130 people remote. It was like peak COVID. It was like September 2020 or something like that. And we one of the exercises I did is I did a Mad Lib. I did a stories Mad Lib and I wrote it and I
love Mad Libs. Yeah.
and right, it's great. And I asked everyone to fill it out and I said it was a Google form. It's a Google form Mad Lib about stories. And I said it would go into my Google Drive and no one else would ever see it. And I would take secrets to my grave and I would read some of them, but I would read them totally anonymously out loud. And when we're having this big thing, I basically I said, I gave apparently it was a very inspirational speech. Because number one, I said, I think when we're doing this work, the 130 of us, our product's in a weird place. Doesn't feel great. A lot of people are frustrated with it. You know, I was literally brought in to help reimagine the future of stories. And I said, I think one of the things that we need to do is like, it's really hard to change something this big if you're not all on the same page. Like we have to start from the same place. And I think one of the ways we have to do that is I think we have to be honest about how we all feel about the product and not wonder if you're the only person in the room who thinks it's a big pile of crap at the moment or hates it or thinks it's stupid and decisions are bad, or if you're the only person who loves it. So I said, I'm going to read a selection of Mad Libs. And I read them out loud. And I said, now that I've read this wide range of Mad Libs, some of which were like, stories is the best and I love it and I go to all the time. And some of them were like, it's the stupidest feature we have and I hate it and I never go in. What's wrong with Instagram and everything's bad, right? And I was like, hopefully you feel reflected in this spectrum of perspective. So what you can take away is that when you're in a meeting with other people, chances are there's someone else in the meeting who thinks everything's dumb or great. And you're not alone. And we can all admit that like stories has some good things and stories has some bad things. And we have a lot of work to do, but we really can't do that unless we all acknowledge this is a challenging inflection point for the product. And we have to be there together. And then I said, like, I think the inspirational thing was I said, you know, when I was asked, do you want to come in and reimagine the future of stories? I was like, that is a once in a lifetime opportunity. It really is. It's the most, I'll never get that chance again. I will never get the chance to go in and affect a product that is used by hundreds of millions of people every day. And not only that, I got to do it to such a degree that I helped to make something people loved. They still love. It's like a fundamental part of the app now, right? They use it in their advertising. And people really loved it. And it actually solved in some ways a fundamental user need. That's why they loved it. But before I ever got there, I was like, you don't get the chance to, and I was like, and more than that, you're fundamentally thinking about people's stories. And that is like the greatest gift you can give anyone is helping people tell their own story more effectively. Woo, it was all very inspirational.
That could be your business, the title of your business book.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta asterisk that one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Should we write it down? No, we're recording it. What was the title?
Now I forget, but it's so thinking about it. I'll have to rewind the tape. Let's go.
Helping people tell their own stories. If anyone's listening to this, don't write that book. But I think that like when you're doing a lot of the work we did did that one stupid 6-hour day that I put together solve every, no. Were there still lots of problems? Yes. Right. But like, I do think if you're going to do some of this, we work together, user experience, user research work, the way it unfolds. I think that you have to start with your own team. And you're going to have people who be like, such a waste of time. And I hate this. And you're annoying. And ugh, why are we doing this? And I just want to go code, or I want to go design, or I want to go, I don't know, write a product spec, whatever you want to do. But I do think there's real value in stopping and saying, like, what do we not understand? What are we doing? And what do we think we're doing? And what are we actually doing? What should we be doing? Right? Start there, get real. It's very real world, original run, early 90s, MTV. And then I think you can start to do a better job with your user experience, because I think you can start to identify where your own blinders and biases are that are keeping you locked off from reimagining aspects of your product. Like, what are you holding on to? Right? It's like therapy, literally. It's like any kind of therapy, right? Which is, fun fact about me, I have been an advice columnist twice in my life. And the two fundamental things I learned about being an advice columnist, 3, which is that teenage boys definitely want to ask you about all the bumps they have that they don't know who else to talk to about. And 99% of them are hair follicles that are clogged. The other 2 things that I learned.
Also be a good title for a business book. Your business book.
The other 2 things I learned is that the vast majority of problems that people have are almost entirely related to communication. And the other problem that people have is that I think I made myself laugh and I forgot the fundamental one, the one that started this whole thing, communication. And I think the other thing is that, like, most people's problems most problems are pretty similar. That wasn't the thing. What was it? Now I've lost it. It was so good.
Well, we started with opportunity matrix.
Yes, but what I mean, we do have to get back to the opportunity matrix. But what I think is really important is that I think the thing is, so you have, number one, communication is really, really, really challenging. But number 2, I think it's like people don't know how to step back and look at their own problem, and they think they know what the problem is, but they're thinking they basically want to know this is what it was. 99% of the emails I got, not 99, but a lot of the emails I got were like, I'm in a relationship and I don't know what she wants. What should I do? And you can't start with what does she want? You have to start with yourself and understand yourself. What are you doing? What are you capable of? What do you need? What do you want? What can you ask for? What can you present? What can you be okay with when you hear something come back, right? And in a very similar way, that's kind of what you do when you're doing really, really good user-driven product development, is you start with yourself as a team. What can we build? What are we capable of? What's technically feasible? Like, in terms of the technology we're building, what are we constrained by? What are our resource constraints? What are our needs? What are our goals fundamentally? Like, what kind of a product? That's what I mean by product principles. Like, we could build a product that does all those things, but we think those things are crappy and we don't want to do that. Like, that actually goes against our principles.
Sure.
And then we need to understand, okay, so what do users need? Right? And like, sometimes it's hard to take a step back and do that, because you have been a company that started by identifying what you needed because you had a problem and you wanted to solve it. And that's where you started. So you always think you're like, well, we'll just keep doing more of that over and over and over again. But the more you work on the problem, the more distance you get from the problem itself.
Yeah, because you're not
that problem. You don't have that problem anymore. You're not in the space. You're not dealing with it. And so you do have to do that. Like, what are we doing as a team? You have to start there a little bit. And that, like, sounds really corny. Like, what do we have, group therapy? Yeah, kind of. Where's the miscommunication? What are we doing? Are we ready to, like, actually go and listen to some users? And the thing about the opportunity matrix that I really like is the way that I do it is that, and this is why I said the thing about Stories Vision Day, which is called Stories Vision Day, by the way. I did not name it. It was called that, though, is that I think that
Stories Vision Day.
Yeah, we're having a vision about what's the vision of this.
It sounds like a big charity event. Like, you would get an email from come to Stories Vision Day.
Yeah, it was not. I hope I don't get sued by Meta for all this. Anyway, I'm not telling company secrets, so it's fine.
We can bleep out names. Beep. Yeah.
Boop. But what I think is what I think was really valuable is that not the Mad Libs thing was fun and it was good because it told us where we are, like where people feel. But I think the thing too that is really important is that you have to do user research and user experience work from a place of honesty about where your product is right now, not where you want it to be. And like genuinely, what does your product do? What does it do well? What does it not do well? What could it do better? What are the table stakes? And the way that I have done a little bit of that work is this opportunity matrix, which is less about like a big competitive matrix, which is like, what's the, market value? What's the total addressable market? What are their feature sets? What's their audience? What are they doing? What are their, where have they been? And it's like a basic matrix, and you have you and your actual competitors, the ones you have now, not the ones you would like to have, not the ones that inspire you, the actual companies that you compete with. And across the top, you have what you think are the fundamental user needs that your product does right now, or should be doing. And I don't mean like doing in the way you reimagine it, like in the space you're in, what are you doing? And then you fill out the matrix really honestly. What you're doing, are you actually doing anything at all? Are you doing a little bit? And you label each one of them red, yellow, green. And like, even if you're doing one thing, you have to be honest. You're like, are we doing it well? Is that actually all we could be doing? What's the user experience? Is it seamless? Does it across all our interfaces? Does it work? Is it a red? Is it a yellow? Is it a green? And then you look at what all your competitors are doing. And that helps you identify what are some of the table stakes aspects of the user experience as it is right now. Where are we falling down? Where are things a mess? What are some small wins we could get? But also, what are some white spaces we see right now without having to do anything else? In all of this work that we see, is that an opportunity that we could like dig into if we want to do a little bit of concept testing, if we want to do a little bit ideating in this other world as we're getting bigger insights about who our users are and what they're doing with our product as it stands? Can we keep our motors running in that space so we don't just feel like we're waiting for user research, which you never wait for user research because I make everyone do it with me. And I think that's opportunity matrix is a really cool way of just like kind of mapping out and looking honestly at the sort of fundamentals of what you're doing and whether they make sense to your users and whether they make sense in your product. And like, what are your competitors actually doing? Are they doing the exact same thing? Are they doing things that you're like, oh, those do seem like table stakes, and we haven't addressed any of those. And here we are wanting to like do a whole new thing. And the things we're supposed to do well, we're like half-assed at.
Yeah. So the problem with that is opportunity matrices like that have been massively misused. And I generally blame Larry Ellison for that, because Larry Ellison back in the day, I worked for Oracle, so I'm going directly to hell. I won't have to wait in line with all the rest of you. I work for Larry Ellison.
Yeah, but we don't know who I worked for.
Huh?
We all know who I worked for.
I'll
be next.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be next to you in line.
But yes, but the Dark Lord is still number one. Like he's covered, he covers the gamut, right? But he had a rule. And all advertising was like, it didn't matter what it was. There had to be a chart that showed Oracle good, competitor bad, right? And I see more dishonesty and opportunity matrices within companies than almost anything else. It's like, you got to be honest with yourself. Here's this feature. Are we really good at it? Did we do a good job on it? And too much of the time, because that's a classic sales advertising chart. You show your product with a bunch of green circles or filled in circles and your competitors without checkboxes or whatever.
But you're not doing it with sales. You're not doing it with sales.
No, I know. But it's become this thing where it's bled over from sale. It's bled over in that people are afraid to just say, let's be frank about, am I good at this or am I not good at this? Right? Because you have to be honest with yourself about it. And I found all my teams always know. Yeah. They always know. They don't. It's not like they're sometimes afraid to say it. It's like, no, this is table stakes, and we're pretty crappy at it.
Right, and but that's where I think it's helpful. Is like, yes, all tools. Look, the jobs to be done tool has been misused 1,001 ways. There are not enough words in the day for me to tell you how much I hated jobs to be done until I kind of revisited it, and I totally agree with you. I think that just because a tool can be misused doesn't mean it can't be used well.
Totally
And
agree. Yep.
the reason I think this one is good is not just like, what are the like features? I'm saying, because I don't do it by feature. I do it by what does the user need? What are the things that we think the product is doing? Like it allows you to do X and it allows you to do Y. And I don't mean specific feature. I mean like, what are the user needs we think we need to address? It's not about, oh yeah, we nail these fucking useless features. I don't care. Right? What are the fundamental things that this product should be doing for the people who use it? Right? And are those the right things? And are we even doing those right things well? And are we doing wrong things well that we shouldn't even be doing at all? Like, what are we doing? And I think that's like a kind of a, your
You're doing
team
wrong
know,
things well. That's another good one.
right?
You're doing wrong things well. That's good. That's another good title. You got to get that should be in the list of titles. I like
That's
that.
one of my book chapter titles. But I think like, so I think that I agree with you. All tools can be used badly, but for me, I don't think a lot of product teams do this work very much because I've worked with a lot of product teams and they don't do them. They might do a classic competitive matrix and maybe sales teams are like, we do everything perfectly. But I think a lot of product teams are kind of set on the path of they have to do this product work and they're just focused on their tasks at hand. And they don't really think about what their whole product looks like when it comes together. Because that's also, frankly, you said, what's user experience? It's a whole freaking product. It's not just the one feature you work on. It's how does everything come together? And it doesn't feel like 17 different teams built it in that never talk to each other, or 5 teams, or 2 teams, or 6 people, right? Like, how can we as a team, as a group, sit down and go, woohoo, we are kind of bad at that part of it. And actually, that part of it is sort of more of a priority than we have given it credence for. Or as it turns out, guess what? We thought we were really bad at this part of it. We're actually okay. We're like fine enough. And right now, fine enough is good because we can turn our attention. Like, I think that's the other thing is when you're trying to figure out what you should work on, you've limited resources. You're not a big team. You know, you've been thinking like, oh, this thing is really important. And then you're like, actually, when we sit down, we're like, we're yellow. Okay, we could be green, but is it better to turn our attention to turning a red, yellow, or even another more important yellow, green than to focus on this yellow that we've been focusing on? And like that to me is like, if you're looking at it as a whole picture and you're also doing it as a team and not like with this one, we had a really great conversation. I handed it off to the team to finish and then we're going to meet again. Right. I also think it helps to have someone going through it with you who is not a pushover and is not going to let you lie. Right. Like, I'm not afraid.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's that we need to deal with at every layer of the portfolio company, though. It's like it's the everybody's voice in this. I don't believe in that. Everybody's voice about every issue is equally as important. That's not true, right? But the people who know a certain area, know a certain function, drawing that opinion out is super important because that's. Yeah. Obviously we just run over that, which is a problem. And we by definition also have a finite amount of resources to solve a number of problems. We don't, and this is one of the things we focus on, or I focus on is, hey, you can get a C grade in this. You don't need to get an A.
Right.
C grade's good enough.
One of the interesting things about user research that drives me crazy as a discipline and as a job, but I also think ends up being really valuable if you can do it correctly, is that no other role in the industry is asked to take people on the journey with them. Engineers don't have to take it on a journey. Designers.
Bingo card, we use journey. Journey. That's only the second use of the word journey.
Yeah, but this is different. Hold on.
The sheer size. Hi, handsome. Oh, wow. What a handsome baby you are. Oh, booful boy. Booful boy. Oh, yeah. Look at that face. Oh, look at those footies. Those are great footies.
That's huge. Look
I
how
bet
big
he loves the footies scratched. Oh, yeah.
He's all mad. He says, I want dinner and I hate you.
All right. Well, we're ready to wrap up. We're ready to wrap up.
Yeah. Is there good stuff in this or no?
It's great. It's
okay,
awesome.
good.
And we have good ways to split it up too. So
yeah. But I also want to say, really quickly, what were we just talking about? You said journey. Look, I hate it. I hate it. I say that with the most mocking tone, just like, oh, I have to take people on the journey. Like I have to, it's always like making sure people know what you're doing and keeping them updated and making sure they like feel a part of the research process, which is actually really important. The reason I'm mocking it is because no other discipline has to do this. And engineers don't have to take me on their journey and like why they made the decisions. Designers, data scientists, no one. Research does. And it is a little bit frustrating because you get dinged for this if you're not like essentially strong arming people to like participate in research and follow along with all the stuff you're doing. But that said, one of the things that I have discovered as a researcher, and especially the kind of researcher that I am, which is very outspoken, I'm very upfront with people. I like to work directly with a lot of, and I don't call them stakeholders. I don't like the term stakeholders because it makes it sound like I'm serving you. We are partners. But what I think can happen if you are someone who's really good at listening and asking questions and watching and observing, is that you become a little bit of the glue and you can see where the people, like where the failings in communication are happening and who feeling like you can figure out whose opinion actually really you need and whose opinion is important, but like you know how to prioritize
Sure.
them. And I think that's the thing is like part of the really hard part of being a smaller company and a startup is that you're at a weird place for user research. Like you have to think about your user experience, but you're at a weird place for user research, right? You don't necessarily have the work that someone might need to do because you're just in the building process. You're like, I need to get something out. I need to get something out. We can't like really think about like all of that. What are we doing? And then in that mid stage, you do need someone, but it's like, someone like me who I can do all of these things is a lot, can be a lot for some kinds of startups, or they don't know that they need me, or they can't afford me, or whatever, you know what I mean? Whatever it is.
Sure.
And yet at the same time, I think like you need someone who can come in and say, okay, what are we doing? What have we been doing? What's going on? Can we talk to people who can sort of run the full gamut? Like a lot of really great, more junior researchers could go in and be like, let's do a lot of concept testing and ideating. And like, I can talk to some of your users, but to see the really big picture, it's like basically like, you're a firm, right? If you have a like senior person who is good at floating, who can jump in and be like, I'm going to help you guys for a little while. I'm going to work with you for like a month and we're going to figure out what's going on. We're going to do some stuff for 6 weeks or whatever. Or like you go from quarter to quarter, you go from like, I spend a quarter with you and a quarter with you and a quarter with you. You can do that. You can jump in and be like, let's identify. Because the other thing that I think is really hard for a lot of people to understand is that when you do the research yourself, it's fine. People can do research themselves and they can do a not terrible job of it sometimes. And I don't mean because like I'm a genius and like I know how to do research and you don't. It's because it's not your job. You have like 6 other jobs.
And you're also too close to it.
You're too close to it. But the other thing is that what really truly good research is it is keeping a hold of every single thread in all the projects you've done and then stepping back and being like, oh guys, I see it now. This is the big picture. Here's the problem we're trying to solve, right? And here's the big problem, right? And that someone who can kind of keep an eye on like, where are things going? And wow, that's been a lot of stuff. And we keep hearing this over and over again. I think we're going to have to address it like that as a running topic, I think is really important, and maintaining those relationships, which can be really challenging. I know people who are much more junior and they're thrown into situations where they have to like deal with a lot of uncertainty, deal with a lot of more difficult stakeholders, and they have to navigate those things. And it's really hard. And I think that like at companies that are in this sort of small, medium-ish size, you can have a user researcher, but sometimes it might be more helpful to have someone who can be your consultant, who can like come in and do some of that uncomfortable question asking internally, and then also take you on the journey of like, I'm going to talk to your users. You're going to sit on your hands. You will not interrupt. You will not tell them how to do it. And you will watch and hear about the things that they're trying to do. And like, the only reason I know that is that I remember when we worked on the admin dashboard at Slack, and engineers are frequently the most ignored when it comes to research. They're not asked to participate, or they don't want to, or whatever. I had engineers regularly pinging me when are we doing more research? When are we doing more interviews? I would be in a little room on Zoom with some like CTO, and there'd be like 4 researchers lying on the floor out of sight, like taking notes, because they're like, it helps us envision the actual thing we need to build rather than like some vague sketch idea we have of it based on what all of us think. None of us really know what we're doing. And that for me is like the most powerful thing, is like when you give people the perspective and the knowledge to build something, and they can talk about it amongst themselves, which develops healthier relationships of not only about the product, but about the people that buy your product.
Yeah, and all engineers at the end of the day want people to use the stuff they write.
Right, exactly. Right.
It's a fun thing.
And you can like, I really feel like I really like encouraging specifically engineers to develop the voice, to talk about people, to talk about the product. Because I think a lot of engineers are not encouraged to do that. And I really love being able to do that with engineers. And I love partnering closely with design and working with my PMs and working with, I think product marketing is always left out of the loop until too late. Like, you want to talk about your product and sell it to people? Well, you should be involved in the beginning. You should know how we got here, because otherwise it's not going to feel like the whole thing is part of the process. So I think like, yes, everyone's a limited resource, but like a little bit of a limited resource is better than no resource at all. And a lot of these, like, part of it is like, how can we come up with another solution that really shows the true value of what we're doing, and how do we do that more effectively than like slapping something on that's just going to fail in the long run?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that at the end of the day, that's, we have found it, when we talked about this, I think one of the fundamental things about Jeffrey Moore is crossing the chasm, is that idea of the whole product, which does include getting marketing into it early, understanding why they're positioning what we're building and why they're doing it the right way.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm working a lot with the marketing people here at Mozilla and at Firefox, and it's fun because they have questions that are so important, and that as I'm doing research, I can start to ask to get not just like, what could we conceive in terms of feature development or product work that we do, but how does this then connect to the ways in which we talk about those features in the product itself? And I love being able to do that, because like I want to be able to answer everyone's questions, and I'm able, like, the other thing too is like I can do projects that I call them Trojan horsing, where even if I'm doing a little bit of like concept testing, I can shove a bunch of big questions in there and actually pull some really big insights out without having to just go do like some big, massive foundational project. It depends on where you are and what you're doing. So it's fun. Like, I think researchers can do all of these things, and we do a lot of this stuff, but a lot of companies just don't have access to it, or they don't know how to get access to it. And it's always easier to start it early. It's harder to come in late.
I did, by the way, just to put a pin in that, I was disappointed recently to find out that the Trojan horse thing wasn't real. It was just part of the story, but there's no evidence that there was actually ever a Trojan horse, which I found disturbing. It's always a great story.
It's such a good myth.
But it's a good myth, yeah, but it's definitely a myth. Like, it's definitely didn't exist. Like,
to be fair,
it sounded stupid as like, it sounds good as a myth, but I don't think anybody'd be dumb enough to like,
Well, also, do you ever think about how big the
horse
horse
would be? Oh, it's the same thing with like, you can't believe in Noah's Ark because it's impossible to build that thing. Like, literally impossible to build that thing.
What would be harder to build that thing would be to get the cats onto it.
If you get one of those little like dangly mice things, I think you can.
I gave him dinner. Oh my God, he's so mad.
Well, we have more to talk about, but
yeah,
thank you for joining today.
Yes,
I know it's Lumpy's dinner hour. This was great. Happy Friday.
You as well.
And we'll talk. We're going to talk about your master's thesis, because that's to AI. I think it's some interesting cross topics.
I have a whole separate one about AI.
I have a strong opinion on this.
I have really strong opinions on this.
No.
Great. Well, thanks, Jim. It was great.